Hello, and welcome to Bread Theory. I am Zach, and tonight we are going to start a brand new book. Well, it's not a brand new book. It's been around for a number of decades, but it's brand new to us. It has been published under a few different titles, including the ABC of Anarchy and the What is Anarchist Communism? But however you call it, however it's been published, it is the introductory anarchist text from Alexander Berkman, a well-known anarchist who was very influential in the early 20th century in the U.S. Good friends with Emma Goldman. That's both of them there after their trial in the background picture. And he was just asked to share some ideas about introducing people to anarchy, and that's what he came up with. So we had just finished up last week the State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. Had a exciting ending there with Lenin saying, I plan to write a lot more for this book, but I have a revolution to take care of, so I'm going to go off and do that. So that was cool. I really enjoyed that book. It really illuminated a lot of concepts for me about what at least Leninist communism is all about, and how he viewed things, and how he wanted things to be, and whether or not he got there after the overthrow of the old Russian government. That's another matter, but we'll cover that on another day. So for now, we're going to switch back to the anarchist side of things. Hello, Radiant. I'm doing well. How are you? We are going to be talking about What is Anarchist Communism tonight by Alexander Berkman. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and queue up that video right now for Chapter 1. I think we're going to go through the author's foreword first. So we'll do the foreword to the book. It's not that long. It's only a 7-minute thing. But we'll go ahead and do that.
This audio.
All right. Good to feed your brain. All right. Well, yeah, and as always, I'm glad you're doing well. That's great, Radiant. And as always, if anyone has any questions about what's going on, anything they'd like to add, feel free to put it in the chat. Oh, and I keep forgetting to take that caption off. I'm not starting soon. I have started. I'm going to go ahead and prompt you to go to the Discord as well. If you have any sort of links ever that you want to share, that's the place for it. And also it's a place to keep the conversation going, even when I'm not streaming. Hopefully you meet other people that are interested in the same sort of stuff. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I just got some new plants. Oh, I'll have to shift this way. You can see it just over my shoulder there. I just got today, I rescued some jasmine. They are about to be taken by the cold. I do landscaping as my day job, and a big part of that is I maintain these big planters. You know, the ones we were looking at today, or the ones we were dealing with today, were probably about 4 feet wide, just these big kind of urn-shaped things. And I had planted jasmine for the fall time planting as part of it, just to add another dimension to it. Jasmine's one of my favorite scents of all, and it's very fragrant. Even in the middle of downtown Minneapolis, you could still smell it really well. And looked at the forecast this weekend, and it's going to be really cold. It's going to freeze pretty solid. So, I managed to schedule things just right that I could go and take out all the stuff from fall as we get ready to put in the winter decorations. Winter's a little bit different with the arrangements. Instead of plants, we're doing things like spruce tops. So it's basically just the ends of branches, and we arrange them with, like, dogwood and birch, and we've even put up holiday lights and stuff like that. It's been really cool. So we're going to start doing that next week, and that'll be the last planters of the season. So yeah, pretty cool. Before we get into the book too, let's do that first, actually. One more plug for getting in your votes for the lefties. And that is my group on Facebook, Left Signal Boost. Every year, this is now our second year, we put on a little award show. It's going to be right here on my channel. And it's basically just a way to expose people to a wide range of different leftist content creators. So we give out awards for every platform you can imagine, every medium in arts you can imagine. And it's all nominated and voted on by the people themselves, by anyone who is a member of Left Signal Boost. So all you got to do is go there. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. Head on over to Left Signal Boost. So there you go. Yeah, if you follow that link and you join the group, and it's pretty easy. I let basically everyone in as long as they're not some obvious bot. Um, but definitely as long as you answer the questions, you'll get into the group, and then you can make sure that your favorite leftist content creators and works get nominated for this year. So there's only a few days left for the nominating process, and then we'll get into the voting, which again is open to everybody. So it's just a way to have an award show that's not just, you know, the like with the movie award shows, it's all very self-congratulatory and, you know, not in any way democratic or the will of the people that actually, you know, support the media at all. So we're doing this a little bit differently. So yeah, I encourage you all to go check that out and nominate your favorite people for a lefty. And we will be having the live stream the day after U.S. Thanksgiving. I think 6 o'clock was the time we settled on, and it's gonna be right here on the Bread Theory stream, wherever it is you're finding it right now. So it should be a lot of fun, and I'll be joined by For We Are Many people, Rob and Trish, and perhaps some more people too. Hopefully some more people. So yeah, if you want to be a part of that as well, definitely go ahead and volunteer. And, you know, definitely there's a lot of work to be done. In the meantime, we're going to be putting together clips for everyone who gets nominated. So like a little, you know, 5-second clip at least of everybody's work that we'll be playing on award show night. So no matter how the voting breaks down, everyone who is, you know, been given some love by someone out there is going to get recognition for that. So, yeah. All right. I think we'll move ahead then into the video. So we'll go like that. How do we want to frame it? I think that's a better framing tonight. And we will start chapter 1. And again, usually when we're doing anarchist text, we're using Audible Anarchist. It's a really great resource on YouTube. And you can also find them on LibriVox. That's another service that's great for free audiobooks. But they do a really good job of getting out all these older texts that are in the public domain. So here we go with chapter 1 of Alexander Berkman's What is Communist Anarchism, also known as the ABC of Anarchism.
Video production was made in collaboration with Audible Anarchist.
And I'll bump up the audio too, so it seems to come in soft for me.
What is Communist Anarchism? By Alexander Berkman. Author's Foreword. I consider anarchism the most rational and practical conception of a social life in freedom and harmony. I am convinced that its realization is a certainty in the course of human development. The time of that realization will depend upon 2 factors. First, on how soon existing conditions will grow physically and spiritually unbearable to considerable portions of mankind.
Let's just give some reference for that too. Let's see when he actually wrote that. Give you a little bit of background information so things will make a little more sense as we go along here. So let's look up. A little bit about that. Oh, it's also been published under Now and After, the ABC of Communist Anarchism. So there's been many titles that it's come under, but it's all the same work. So this was an introductory piece by Berkman, and it was first published in 1929. So, man, I guess that was into the Great Depression already, but things, I think, got a lot worse before they got better. And in fact, there was a big push to make conditions better. And the choice was between going with some form of socialism or communism or even anarchism and making a bunch of concessions. And the course that the country went, as you may know, was to institute the New Deal. And that was the big concession to workers, strengthened unions. It put a whole lot of people to work. There was a lot of people out of work at the time, and it kind of consequently crushed that left-wing movement. It robbed it of its momentum and power, because enough people were then satisfied with the outcome of the New Deal that they stopped paying as much attention to those sorts of politics. So so he was just talking about that basically material conditions are what's going to force a push towards anarchism. But here we find ourselves again, where I feel like we're kind of at that same or a very similar space to right before the New Deal, where a lot of people are out of work. A lot of people cannot find enough employment to satisfy their needs. And conditions just seem to be getting worse and worse. I mean, there hasn't been really a raise in average income since, I think, the late 1970s. When you account for inflation, the working class has just slipped further and further back. So I think this is a relevant text to today as well, because we're finding ourselves in very similar conditions. But yeah, let's continue with the forward here.
Particularly to the laboring classes, and secondly, on the degree in which anarchist views will become understood and accepted. Our social institutions are founded on certain ideas. As long as the latter are generally believed, the institutions built on them are safe. Government remains strong because people think political authority and legal compulsion necessary. Capitalism will continue as long as such an economic system is considered adequate and just. The weakening of ideas which support the evil and oppressive present-day conditions means the ultimate breakdown of government and capitalism. Progress consists in abolishing what man has outlived and substituting in its place a more suitable environment. It must be evident, even to the casual observer, that society is undergoing a radical change in its fundamental conceptions. The World War and the Russian Revolution are the main causes of it. The war has unmasked the vicious character of capitalist competition and the murderous incompetency of governments to settle quarrels among nations, or rather among the ruling financial cliques. It is because the people are losing faith in the old methods that the great powers are now compelled to discuss limitations of armaments and even the outlawing of war. It is not so long ago that the very suggestion of such a possibility met with utmost scorn and ridicule. Similarly is breaking down the belief in other established institutions. Capitalism still, quote, works, but doubt about its expediency and justice is gnawing at the heart of ever-widening social circles.
Oh, and geez, isn't that completely descriptive of today's conditions? It seems like, especially over the last decade, really, especially since things like the Great Recession and then Occupy, people's faith in the system to ever come through for them seems to be just eroding little by little. I mean, think about how things such as where am I going? Like police brutality, and the idea that police could be an unreformable institution. These ideas are becoming more and more mainstream today. It's much more widely accepted that the system is designed basically just to care for the capitalist class, the owning class, and that everyone else, justice is, maybe a happy side effect, or coincidentally rendered in some cases, but not guaranteed at all. That's a drastic change since even I was a kid. People didn't really question police all that much. I mean, there would be outlying incidents like the Rodney King beating that shocked people. But even back then, it was usually just kind of brushed aside as, bad cops, but not a bad system. And now it seems like people are questioning the system entirely, a lot more. And the idea that, if you just work hard and keep your head down, that you can get ahead, this idea seems to be eroding as well. Because it's not working. I mean, especially for my generation, the millennials. We see the lie in that offer. I mean, so many of us have gone to college, myself included, and still haven't gotten ahead. Still haven't gotten our ticket to the working, or to the middle class, that is. Very low home ownership amongst the millennials, very low portion of wealth overall controlled by millennials, especially as compared to Gen X and the boomers when they were our current age range. They controlled much more of the pie. I think they had something like 20% with the boomer generation. And now the millennials are down to something like 5%, 2.5%, something like that. It's become pretty evident that the system is only good for a certain small select minority. So that's interesting that he's basically making those same arguments, but back more around the time of the Great Depression. Oh yeah, so you saw that on television as well. Oh, the Rodney King thing. Oh, horrifying. And it really shocked a lot of people because, of course, this stuff had been going on since there had been police. I mean, the police were instituted originally to mainly catch slaves that were fleeing and to bring them back to protect the capitalist class. And, I mean, it's hard to even call them the capitalist class. They were basically they basically had a slave economy. So the slaver class even. But the police even back then were there to protect their property. And since the slaves were their property, that was their main function. And they have since been dressed up to pretend to be about much more. But when it comes down to it, when there's something like any sort of an uprising, or, someone breaks a window at a rally or something like that, you'll see very quickly that the police are there to protect property and a certain group of people's property, first and foremost. The rich and powerful. That's what they're there for. Behind the Bastards did a really great series called Behind the Police. I think they even spun it off into a mini-series, like a standalone thing. I'll go find a link for that as we read along here. I'll put that in the chat. But man, they, even if you know a little bit about the truth and history of policing, the depth that they go into, and just the way that they utterly destroy this notion of the police being there to serve and protect the common person, it's really incredible. And I think, even people that are well informed can learn a lot from it. So I'll go find that link as we continue to listen.
The Russian Revolution has broadcasted ideas and feelings that are undermining capitalist society, particularly its economic basis and the sanctity of private ownership of the means of social existence. For not only in Russia did the October change take place, it has influenced the masses throughout the world. The cherished superstition that what exists is permanent has been shaken beyond recovery. The war, the Russian Revolution, and the post-war developments have also combined to disillusion vast numbers about socialism. It is literally true that, like Christianity, socialism has conquered the world by defeating itself. The socialist parties now run, or help to run, most of the European governments, but the people do not believe anymore that they are different from other bourgeois regimes. They feel that socialism has failed, and is bankrupt. In like manner have the Bolsheviki proven that Marxist dogma and Leninist principles can only lead to dictatorship and reaction.
Yeah. So Berkman was a pretty big detractor of the way the Bolshevik Revolution played out, and the power structures that arose afterward in the Soviet Union. Him and Emma Goldman, I believe they were deported to Russia. I'll check on that as well. I'll check that fact, but I believe they were deported there because Americans didn't like that there were anarchist agitators in the country, and so they came up with an excuse to put them through a trial and then deport them. And at first they were both hopeful that this new Soviet Union was going to be the real deal in their minds, but I think they were both quickly disillusioned by their experiences. That's not to say that that's the only valid perspective, but I think that definitely was theirs. So I think this is almost certainly written after he had been deported. So he's speaking from his experience with, firsthand with the USSR.
To the anarchists, there is nothing surprising in all this. They have always claimed that the state is destructive to individual liberty and social harmony, and that only the abolition of coercive authority and material inequality can solve our political, economic, and national problems. But their arguments, though based on the age-long experience of man, seemed mere theory to the present generation, until the events of the last 2 decades have demonstrated in actual life the truth of the anarchist position. The breakdown of socialism and Bolshevism has cleared the way for anarchism. There is considerable literature on anarchism, but most of its larger works were written before the World War. The experience of the recent past has been vital and has made certain revisions necessary in the anarchist attitude and argumentation. Though basic propositions remain the same, some modifications of practical application are dictated by facts of current history. The lessons of the Russian Revolution, in particular, call for a new approach to various important problems. Chief among them, the character and activities of the social revolution. Furthermore, anarchist books, with few exceptions, are not accessible to the understanding of the average reader. It is the common failing of most works dealing with social questions that they are written on the assumption that the reader is already familiar to a considerable extent with a subject, which is generally not the case at all. As a result, there are very few books treating of social problems in a sufficiently simple and intelligible manner. For the above reason, I consider a restatement of the anarchist position very much needed at this time, a restatement in the plainest and clearest terms which can be understood by everyone, that is, an ABC of anarchism. With that object in view, the following pages have been written.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist. You can find more Audible Anarchist on YouTube. This audio production was made in collaboration with Audible Anarchist.
Introduction. I want to tell you about anarchism. I want to tell you what anarchism is because I think it is well you should know it. Also because so little is known about it, and what is known is generally hearsay and mostly false. I want to tell you about it because...
So Radiant says, I logged into my Facebook. You're the only streamer I trust to do that with. I'm not sure I follow Radiant, but I mean, I guess thanks. Oh. So you can go to the lefties. Okay, that I'm takes me a half a second sometimes to catch up to what people are saying. But hopefully you go and vote, or not vote, but nominate people. Yeah. So cool. Thank you for doing that, and I hope, I hope you have some good selections that you can add to the mix.
I believe that anarchism is the finest and biggest thing that man has ever thought of. The only thing that can give you liberty and well-being and bring peace and joy to the world. I want to tell you about it in such plain and simple language that there will be no misunderstanding it. Big words and high-sounding phrases serve only to confuse. Straight thinking means plain speaking. But before I tell you what anarchism is, I want to tell you what it is not. That is necessary because so much falsehood has been spread about anarchism. Even intelligent persons often have entirely wrong notions about it. Some people talk about anarchism without knowing a thing about it, and some lie about anarchism because they don't want you to know the truth about it. Anarchism has many enemies. They won't tell you the truth about it. Why anarchism has enemies and who they are, you will see later in the course of this story. Just now I can tell you that neither your political boss, nor your employer, neither the capitalist, nor the policeman will speak to you honestly about anarchism.
Oh, I mean, that's absolutely true. And in fact, if you were to ever mention that you were an anarchist or even read anarchist theory, that could be not necessarily grounds for overt firing, because you're not supposed to be able to be fired for political beliefs. But they would probably find a reason to, they would be, all the small infraction that maybe you've committed in the past, they would bring up as reasons to fire you. They would find a reason. So, but that's also the case of basically any leftist philosophy, because all of them are completely at odds with a capitalist mindset. They don't want that sort of exploitation to be able to continue. They see it as pretty abhorrent to be able to just hoard one resource or another, and then through that hoarding alone, coerce people into working for you and then taking a portion of your money in the form of profit. So, yeah, to pretty much all leftist philosophies, and definitely all leftist philosophies, actually, that's a pretty bad deal. And it's on the same level as feudalism or, even slavery. I mean, it's definitely not as egregious as either of those things, but it's still in the same direction. It's the idea of using arbitrary power to exploit other people for your own personal gain. So, yeah. Oh, you're not familiar with anarchy too much, Radiant. Well, cool. This was recommended to me as one of the best introductory texts. That's a difficult word. One of the best introductory texts of anarchism. So, yeah. Hopefully it'll help illuminate some of those ideas as well. Okay. What was I doing there?
Most of them know nothing about it, and all of them hate it. Their newspapers and publications, the capitalist press, are also against it.
Of course.
Even most socialists and Bolsheviki misinterpret anarchism. True, the majority of them don't know any better, but those who do know better also often lie about anarchism and speak of it as disorder and chaos. You can see for yourself how dishonest they are in this. The greatest teachers of socialism, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, had taught that anarchism would come from socialism. They said that we must first have socialism, but after socialism there will be anarchism. and that it would be a freer and more beautiful condition of society to live than socialism. Yet the socialists who swear by Marx and Engels insist on calling anarchism chaos and disorder, which shows how ignorant or dishonest they are.
And as we saw, at least with State and Revolution, Lenin was very specific in the anarchists that he criticized, mainly Kautsky, who, if you, by today's standards anyway, and I would assume even by back then, the standards, was more of just a social democrat. He basically just wanted to work alongside the capitalist ruling class to get more concessions for workers, but wasn't really interested in doing away with capitalism. And as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the entry level to the left. To actually be a leftist, you have to want to do away with capitalism. That's just the basics of it. Now, where you want to go from there, that's definitely up for debate. But it's hard to it's hard to square the idea of allowing exploitation of workers and allowing those sorts of exploitative relationships, and then backing that up by law, and also desiring like a more egalitarian, free, and democratic society. Those things just don't really end up mixing in the end, because when it comes down to it, the way that the workplace is structured, it's not as a democracy, not under capitalism. It is an autocracy, or at best, I guess an oligarchy, if you have like a board of directors who are making decisions. But it's definitely not a democracy. You don't really get a say in your pay. You may be able to negotiate with your boss. You may have some soft power that you can wield against them. If your skills are in high demand and you can threaten to go to a competitor, then maybe so. You have some soft power, but that's not formalized power. And that makes the system authoritarian, in the worst sense of the word. It's top down. It's all the conditions are dictated by one person or a handful of people. And your only actual choice is to just pick a different master, or become a master yourself if you are so fortunate that you have the means to acquire the capital to start your own business. But you're just perpetuating exploitation. It's just other people instead of you. So that's why I say that the entry level of the left is to reject the capitalist form. All right, continuing on.
The Bolsheviki do the same, although their greatest teacher, Lenin, had said that anarchism would follow Bolshevism, and then it will be freer to live. Therefore, I must tell you first of all...
And that is what Lenin said. That was his conception of things. And I don't think it's without its logic either. Marx had said that capitalism was a necessary transitionary phase between the old feudal system and the new, at least socialist system, that societies had to go through that transitionary phase. It'd be very difficult to go straight from monarchy to socialist rule, because it would be just such a radically different form of organizing society that, there'd be a big chance that not enough people would be behind it and it would somehow fail and go back to the old system. And that almost happened actually in the Russian Revolution. In the Russian Revolution, they were fighting the old Tsar, the old monarchy. And there was a point where I was just I was listening to a Behind the Bastards episode today on Nestor Makhno, who's one of the most famous anarchist warlords, who was fighting against the Russian Tsar during the Russian Revolution. At the same time that the Red Army was fighting against them. That would be Lenin's army, and Trotsky's army as well. And there was a point where the Tsarist army, I should say, the old monarchical army was the called the White Army, and there was one point where they almost had victory over the Red Army. They were on a back foot, and it could have gone very badly for the Red Army, and their revolution could have been squashed. But Nestor Makhno came in with his Black Army, and through some pretty harrowing maneuvers, outflanked one of the most elite companies. I don't know, companies, division, doesn't really matter. One of the most elite fighting forces of the Red Army, not the Red Army, the White Army, totally destroyed them, and then continued to rampage against more and more of the White Army's forces, and preserved the revolution. So yeah, there was something to be said that it's very difficult to just transition straight from monarchy to capitalism. That it's too quickly a leap forward. So it maybe even so that logic then follows that if we're going to transition to a completely stateless, moneyless, classless society, which is ultimately what anarchism is, it may be necessary to go through that socialist phase first, where there still is some form of hierarchy. It's much more democratically controlled. It's much more directly controlled by the people, and there's a lot more checks on that power. But instead of propping up the capitalist class as its reason for existence, it would be to empower the working class. So it'd be a workers' state, basically. So it may be necessary to go through that phase before we get to finally a system that is fair and balanced enough and uplifts people to be able to reach their highest and best potentials. It may be necessary to go through a phase of socialism where there is still a little bit more of hierarchy. It's just not at all the same sort of hierarchy. It's not rigid, it's not entrenched, and it is not for the same purpose at all. But Berkman apparently seems to think you can just leapfrog that and go straight to anarchy. And, he was not alone in that theory. Peter Kropotkin was pretty adamant that same sort of thing could happen, and that organizations to help meet each other's needs through mutual aid would just spontaneously arise. And that as long as you just invested the revolution in the people that actually fight the revolution for you, and throw off the old chains, as long as you make sure that all of the promises you gave to them are fulfilled, that it doesn't really matter all this talk of bureaucracy and hierarchy and political organization. People will just live their lives, and because they have been given a taste of what true freedom and democracy can look like, that they'll never give that up, and they will oppose anyone that comes after them. His big critique of the Paris Commune, which was supposed to be a socialist revolution, was that they spent too much time squabbling over who's going to be what minister, and who's going to what the hierarchy is going to look like, and the power structure is going to look like. And in the meantime, their enemies gathered power and came and reinvaded and destroyed the revolution. So that was Kropotkin's view, and that seems to be pretty much an extension to where, or Berkman is pretty much extending that to his own philosophy as well.
What anarchism is not. It is not bombs, disorder, or chaos. It is not robbery and murder. It is not a war of each against all. It is not a return to barbarism or to the wild state of man. Anarchism is the very opposite of all that. Mm-hmm. Anarchism means that you should be free, that no one should enslave you, boss you, rob you, or impose upon you. It means that you should be free to do the things that you want to do, and that you should not be compelled to do the things that you don't want to do. It means that you should have a chance to choose the kind of life you want to live, and live in it without anybody interfering. It means that the next fellow should have the same freedom as you, and that everyone should have the same rights and liberties. It means that all men are brothers, and they should live like brothers in peace and harmony. That is to say, there should be no war, no violence used by one set of men against another, no monopoly, and no poverty, no oppression, no taking advantage of your fellow man. In short, anarchism means a condition or society where all men and women are free, and where all enjoy equally the benefits of an ordered and sensible life. Can that be, you ask? And how? Not before we all become angels, your friend remarks. Well, let us talk it over. Maybe I can show you that we can be decent and live as decent folks, even without growing wings.
All right, now we're going to get into the
This has been a
first
production
actual
of
chapter.
Audible Anarchist. You can find more
This will be the
Audible
last
Anarchist
section I'll
on YouTube.
cover tonight, I think. Utopia. Yeah, you know what?
This audio
That's a good point. There are different philosophies, and in philosophy, there's utopian philosophy, which is just I'm not real versed on philosophy, I'll admit, but as my understanding is that a utopian philosophy is just trying to conceive of things in terms of the best of all possible conditions, almost in a vacuum. So like you imagine your absolute best world possible, and this is how it functions, and this is the philosophy that guides it. So so that's opposed to I guess scientific philosophies, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, cool. I see you have my new or my relatively new emotes, Radiant. That's cool. But anyway, so the scientific philosophy, I guess by contrast, is supposed to take things as they are and you know, assemble an idea, a theory of how things could be, but also basing it on how things are now. So yeah, what Berkman was saying there was pretty idealistic. You know, the idea that everyone can be just completely self-governed. That's not really possible in any sort of society, even within like, you know, the smallest unit of government, which would be a family. You still have to balance people's needs. No one can do absolutely everything they want at all times, because sometimes what you want is going to come into conflict with what other people want, and there has to be a means of sorting out those conflicts. So in a family, that's just called rules, but by extension, to a societal level, it really is just rules, but it's just they've been codified into what are known as laws to make them sound more, you know, permanent and impressive and all that sort of thing. But ideally, laws are there to balance people's needs and freedoms, right? To give the most freedom to the most amount of people. Now, any society that accepts capitalism, by definition, cannot have that sort of can never meet that ideal of the most freedom to the most people, because it's allowing exploitation of other people. Yeah. So yeah, Berkman is being very aspirational here, very idealistic, but I think we'll be able to see where, you know, it's useful to set that out there as kind of a basis for where all his ideas are going to flow from. So you want to be an anarchist, Radiant? Definitely an anarchist. Oh, cool. All right. I tend to agree more with the anarchist side of things than the communist side. Although, since reading State and Revolution, that has changed a lot. I've really softened a lot more to the communist side. I must admit, at least the way that Lenin sets it out, it's not very different from the way that anarchist society could be set up. It's just that the different levels of power, instead of being, you know, all part of the same system that you are just basically born into because of where you live. In an anarchist society, each of those levels beyond perhaps maybe just your village or your neighborhood would be more voluntary. It'd be a voluntary association. So you'd voluntarily work on agreements and rules with higher levels of government beyond, you know, the smallest unit of you know, human civilization. But that's the main difference. They both want lots of controls so that people can't hoard enough power and wealth to control one another. They both want checks against people who are seeking power. So anarchy and communism are really not all that different when you're looking at these two ways of conceiving of them. But yeah, you're right. We do need to work together to make changes. And that's part of why I don't think a purely individualist anarchism is a viable model for everybody. You have to have some amount of collective effort, because people don't survive just on their own. The reason we have anything in the world that's worth having is because we work together. So I think it's counter to human nature to completely emphasize the individual at the expense of everything else. Yeah, balance. I would agree with that. All right, continuing on.
Production was made in collaboration with Audible Anarchist.
What is Communist Anarchism? By Alexander Berkman. Chapter 1. What do you want out of life? What is it that everyone wants most in life? What do you want most? After all, we are all the same under our skins. Whoever you be, man or woman, rich or poor, aristocrat or tramp, white, yellow, red or black, of whatever land, nationality, or religion, we are all alike in feeling cold and hunger, love and hate. We fear disaster and disease, and try to keep away from harm and death.
Yeah, so this is really good stuff here, in my opinion. This grounds things in the idea that we are all more or less equal. That there may be some distribution of abilities and talents and interests and all that sort of thing, but it's just basically a random distribution across all peoples. And more or less people want the same sorts of things in their life. They want to be secure in their home, in their, you know, employment if they are employed. They want to have the things that they need to survive without so much toil and torment that it destroys them or wears them down over time. And they want things to be fair. You know, all these things are great. It really lays out what basically all leftist philosophies have in common, is they assume that people are more or less equal. And that's what really separates them from right ideologies. And that's really why capitalism is a right ideology, or an ideology of the right. And that's because you'll see time and time again, you know, talk to any business owner that's really proud of the business that they've put together and built up. They'll talk about how not anyone can just do this stuff. You know, they'll constantly bring up these arguments that, you know, some people are inherently lazy and they're not allowed to, or they're not able to put out the effort that it takes to you know, do something that gets you a good reward. Some people are just born leaders. All these sorts of phrases that they'll throw out there, and it all is about the idea that there are natural hierarchies in the world, and that some people are just better than others. That's how they frame their lens of the world. And this is common to all right ideologies, everything from capitalism to monarchism to a slavery economy to fascism. They all have this idea that there is inherent differences among people, and that because of that, some people deserve more and some people deserve less, and that's just the natural order of the world. And it doesn't take that long before that veers into, well, my particular group, whatever group that is, my favorite religion, my favorite race, whatever sort of thing. Well, we just happen to have a lot more people among us that are worthy and deserving of sitting at the top of that. I don't know what you... Oh, sorry. There you go. So it very quickly strays into some form of fascism or another, or if it's not quickly, it ends up doing that. It ends there, basically. If you go far enough right, it always ends in my group's more important than everyone else, and I'm going to come up with a bunch of reasons why this particular group is going to be my scapegoat for all the ills of the world, all the degeneracy and the erosion of the society that our glorious ancestors have built when things were much more homogenous and the right people were on top and all this sort of thing. But it goes across all of right ideology. So this is really good how he's setting things up in contrast to that. There can be no mistaking that what he's talking about, agree with it or not, it's not coming from a place of, I deserve more because of these things that I'm going to enumerate, and this is why I'm an inherently better person, deserving more things. It's instead, we're all about the same. It's just that some people have taken advantage of others and gotten themselves into lofty positions of power, which they have then shut the door in the face of anyone else who tries to gain that same power. Let's continue on. Actually, I think I saw there was some... there was a few questions. All right. Let's catch up with the comments here. So Radiant says, deep. I grew up where I have this and I'm good at this. My neighbor is good at something else. And we traded, we bartered, we all worked together and shared amongst each other. Because you're absolutely right. We're all good at different things. Yeah, everyone has something that they're good at, or have some talent for, or some way of looking at things that's different than other people. That's true. And that's how we make a good community. Absolutely. Yeah. Good communities, in my opinion, are diverse. They have a whole lot of different people from different walks of life, different stories to tell, and different unique elements that they can add to the mix and make things better for everybody. Cottonmouth 63, what commie government in history practiced anarchy or anything close to it? Not one. You're true. That's true. No government has yet gotten to what Lenin called full communism, or what Berkman here calls anarchy. You're right. No one has gotten to a place where they have been able to abolish class, money, and all those sorts of divisions, and move to a resource-based economy where it's based on the needs of the people. That's how distribution would work. No one has gotten to that point yet, and they can't really get to that point while they're having to depend on a global system for exchange. If you want to live in any sort of modern society, there's going to be some resources that your country, no matter how big it is, cannot produce. And so you're going to have to engage in global trade at the very least. So you can't have a purely communist society until everyone is at that level, really. Let's see. All real historical commie governments were totalitarian. No, they weren't. No, that's just absolutely not true. We're gonna watch a video. In fact, this Sunday, I'm gonna do a different stream this Sunday. I've been doing the permaculture stuff. I'm gonna give that a little bit of a break this Sunday, and instead take some videos that have been suggested to me by various community members here. And one of those is going to talk about the political system in Cuba and how it's a pretty democratic system. So, I mean, you're just wrong with that. The exact opposite of anarchy. You are pursuing a fantasy, a deluded dream. Well, I mean, for another thing, we're talking about anarchism here in this book. So, I mean, I happen to I'm trying to contrast this too with other readings that we've done, but I mean, ideally, I would like to live in an anarchic society, a society that's free of arbitrary power structures that favor one class of people over another. Yeah. Yep, we all have something to offer. And we're all worthy. Definitely true. Yeah, capitalism definitely divides and ranks one over the other. Yeah, there's so many myths of capitalism that underpin it. The idea that the poor are poor because they're lazy, and that the rich are rich because they work really hard, and you know they build things up with their bare hands to get ahead. These are all ideas that stem from the notion that some people are just inherently better than others, and also that we live in some sort of meritocracy where if you are better at something, you will naturally rise in your lifetime. People will see that, you will get ahead, and you know the sky's the limit for you. And then conversely, if you are not blessed with any talents, that you will end up at the bottom. And that's just not the case. That can't be the case unless you, look at our system right now. The people in the highest halls of power, almost all of them are white, almost all of them are men, almost all of them are straight, and almost all of them are Christian. So, at the very least, that shatters the notion that we live in a meritocracy, unless you believe that those specific people are just inherently better, in which case you are, you're trending towards the fascist side of things, that there's inherent, that some races and classes and people are inherently better, just by breeding and genetics and lineage and all this sort of nonsense. And if you don't think that's the case, then obviously we don't live in a meritocracy at the very least, because it couldn't just be, there has to be some reason that those specific sorts of people tend to rise to the top. And it can't just be, if it's not inherent qualities, it has to be something else, right? So what is the other explanation? For me, the explanation is that the people that started at the top in this country, when it was founded, they took over the land through their technological advancements and their brutality and ability to dehumanize other people. And then from that point, solidified their position as the rulers of everybody else. And it's just generation after generation, power has been handed down. And so that's the alternate explanation. If it's nothing inherent or essential to a race or a sex of people, then it has to be through unfair power structures and maintaining them throughout time. And that's my one. That's my explanation for it. Cuba is amazing. Yeah, well, we're going to look into it a lot more. And there's a really great podcast out right now. It's called Blowback. I'll look for the link for that one too. And it goes through the history of Cuba from the Cuban Revolution when they overthrew Batista and the capitalists that formerly were ruling Cuba, and it goes all the way from there through the revolutionaries slide towards socialism. Then it goes through land reform, and so on and so forth. It's a really good telling of Cuban history up until pretty recent history, in fact. So I highly recommend that one if you want to know more about how Cuba actually has existed, how they've been targeted by the U.S. and especially the CIA from the inception. And that's the thing that these diehard capitalist worshippers can never really answer, is that if all of these socialist systems are so inherently inferior and destined to fail, why is the U.S. and so much of its resources put towards toppling them from the onset every time they crop up anywhere in the world? And this was literally right after the Cuban Revolution. They had started trying to destabilize things through propaganda efforts, eventually through the laughable Bay of Pigs invasion to retake Cuba for the capitalists, through the embargoes. If it's just destined to fail, how come it hasn't in all this time? That pokes a pretty big hole in the idea that capitalism is inevitable and that any other system is just destined to fall by the wayside. And really, it's only 90 miles off the coast of the U.S. It's a very tiny island nation, and it's managed to hang on through all of the U.S. harassment and overt meddling and assassination attempts of its leaders, year after year and decade after decade. It's managed to hang on and do land reform, give thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of acres back to the peasants, take it from the capitalist sugar plantation owners, giving it back to the peasants, do away with the casino economy, or the casino industry that was taking place beforehand, kick all of those people out, give people all free health care, do away with homelessness, not starve to death despite, really strict U.S. embargoes for decades, to the point where the USSR was its only major trading partner for quite some time. It's managed to weather that entire storm. But if it was just such a weak system, how has it done all of that stuff? Especially with the world's mightiest superpower hounding it that entire time. Yeah. Danny Glover and Oliver Stone put out a wonderful 3-part, says Radiant. Oh, I'll have to look for that one. And Cubans are the best example of humanitarians. Yeah, I'd say that's true. That's definitely a good likelihood. Oh, not to mention they have some of the most pristine wilderness in the entire world. They've managed to, Cuba has managed to preserve some completely unique ecosystems that I believe are only found in Cuba still. They have a bunch of species that are just endemic to the Cuban island. So they haven't obliterated their entire countryside to maintain all of those social systems either. It's a pretty incredible success story if you look at it. And from what I can tell so far, it seems like by and large the people are fairly happy with their system, and they feel like they actually do have a say in their government. It seems a lot more like a true worker state. Now, that's just my impression so far. I haven't delved into it all that much yet, so that opinion may change as I continue to study more about it. But that's where I'm at right now, anyway. Natalie says, and the number of doctors they volunteered out during the pandemic, not to mention the vaccine that they had to engineer themselves for the COVID-19, and are now distributing around to parts of the world that the U.S. is not giving the vaccine to. It's incredible. It's pretty incredible. So anyway, that's all a way of saying that that chatter earlier, you really have no idea what you're talking about, and you're just either acting in good faith, spouting off these talking points, or you've never really critically thought about whether or not they're true. You've certainly never looked at the world and compared it to your conception of it. Because if you had, you would have seen that it doesn't all line up with what you're thinking at all. But anyway, let's get back to the book, because I do want to get through this night. I mean, it's only 12 minutes long, but yeah, let's keep going.
What do you want out of life? What do you fear most? That is also true in the main of your neighbor. Learned men have written big books, many of them on sociology, psychology, and many other ologies, to tell you what you want. But no two of these books ever agree. And yet I think you know very well without them what you want. They have studied and written and speculated so much about this, for them so difficult a question, that you, the individual, have become entirely lost in their philosophies. And they have at last come to the conclusion that you, my friend, don't count at all. What's important, they say, is not you, but the whole, and all the people together. This whole they call society, the commonwealth, the state. And the wiseacres have actually decided that it makes no difference if you, the individual, are miserable as long as society is all right. Somehow they forget to explain how society, or the whole, can be all right if single members of it are wretched. So they go on spinning their philosophic webs and producing thick volumes to find out where you really enter the scheme of things called life, and what you really want. But you yourself know very well what you want, and so does your neighbor. You want to be well and healthy. You want to be free, to serve no master, to crawl and humiliate yourself before no man. You want to have well-being for yourself, your family, to those near and dear to you, and not to be harassed and worried about the fear of tomorrow. You may feel sure that everyone else wants the same. So whole the matter seems to stand this way. You want health, liberty, and well-being. Everyone is like yourself in this respect. Therefore, we all seek the same thing in life. Then why should we not all seek it together by joint effort, helping each other in it? Why should we rob, cheat, kill, and murder each other if we seek the same thing? Aren't you entitled to the things that you want as well as the next man? Or is it that we can secure our health, liberty, and well-being better by fighting and slaughtering each other? Or is it because there is no other way? Let us look into this. Does it not stand to reason that if we all want the same thing in life, if we have the same aim, that our interests must also be the same? In that case, we should live like brothers, in peace and friendship. We should be good to each other, and help each other all we can. But you know that it is not that way in life. You know that we do not live like brothers. You know that the world is full of strife and war, of misery, injustice, and wrong, of crime and poverty and oppression. Why is it that way then? It is because though we all have the same aim in life, our interests are different. And this is what makes all the trouble in the world. Just think it over yourself. Suppose you want to get a pair of shoes or a hat. You go into the store and try to buy what you need as reasonably and cheaply as you can. That is your interest. But the storekeeper's interest is to sell it to you as dearly as he can, because then his profit will be greater. That is because everything in the life that we live is built on making profit one way or another. We live in a system of profit making. Now it is plain that if we have to make profits out of each other, then our interests cannot be the same. They must be different, and even often opposed to each other. In every country, you will find people who live by making profit out of others. Those who make the biggest profits are rich. Those who cannot make profits are poor. The only people who cannot make any profits are the workers. You can therefore understand why the interests of the workers cannot be the same as the interests of others.
Okay, so the idea that workers cannot make profit, that's an important concept. And this is common to Marxist theory as well. Profit comes from the excess money generated by someone's labor that you then take for yourself to do with what you will. So if you work for, well, you can just take my work, for example, because I actually know how much my company charges for my labor to its clients. I'm a landscaper, and I know that they charge almost exactly double what they give me to whatever client we have. And I also know that that doesn't account for expenses because they factor that in too. They will factor in the truck that I use, the gas that I use, the tools that I use, any materials that I use as well. That's all differently charged to the customer. Or that's different columns that end up getting charged to the customer. But for my labor, they charge double what I make. Double. And that money goes somewhere. And sure, that money partially goes to people that do things like sales and marketing, sometimes design work, although I often do the design work myself, which I'm sure saves my company tons of money. Because I'm doing it at my rate, not the rate of their designers. But aside from that, so some of that money goes to marketing and to things like, rental of the building and, various business expenses. But I'm sure not all of it does. That's a big portion of money to then be redistributed as the owner sees fit. And the owner's the only one that gets to decide where that goes. But in essence, all the money that's not going towards paying your workers and upkeeping your machinery, business, the property that you're renting or owning, all of that money is then profit. And the only way that you can generate profit is to have workers. You can't really just profit from yourself because you're just paying yourself then. That's just factored into your salary. Or it just goes towards your salary. So this idea that workers cannot profit is important. And it's important to see in your everyday life that, whatever it is that you are being compensated for, chances are the place that you work for is being compensated much higher than that. And they are deciding themselves, without your say, where that money goes. So as long as there is a worker-owner relationship, that will always be the case. I mean, that's the reason you hire workers, right? It's to make profit. It's to say, here's an amount of work that I couldn't do myself, and so I at least need other people to help me do it. But because I'm the owner, I can get away with giving them only a portion of the money that they generate by whatever it is they do, whether it's a service like what I do. I'm in the service industry as a landscaper. Whether it's a good, whether you are manufacturing, it doesn't really matter what it is. Computers, just say computers. You know, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. But basically, whatever it is that you are doing, whether you're making a good or you're performing a service, you are generating a lot more income for the company than you are being compensated. And all of that excess, it's excess labor value, is the profit. And in our system, the owner gets to decide on their own where that profit goes. And usually it's to themselves, who would have thought? But it also might go to management to help incentivize them to stay on. It could just be reinvested into the company, but you don't get a say in that. So the idea is to move beyond that, really, to the point where, at the very least, all the workers of a company decide democratically where all that money goes, how it's redistributed, what it's put toward. If you're going to reinvest it in the company, if you're just going to redistribute it as extra income for everybody, whether you're going to purchase new materials or properties to continue doing your work or expand your work. All these things would be decided democratically in any leftist system, whether it's socialism, communism, or anarchy. So yeah, it's an important concept. So keep that in mind.
Other people. That is why you will find in every country several classes of people with entirely different interests.
Sorry to pause it so quickly there, but Natalie just asked if I've ever thought of starting my own landscape business, and I certainly have. And I actually used to run my own landscaping business on basically just a shoestring budget. We had a truck, and we had a bunch of hand tools, and we had my knowledge of plants. And that all I got myself. It's funny that the knowledge that I've gotten just learning on my own, things like permaculture and landscaping and native plants, edible plants, all these different things, has served me a lot more than all of the schooling that I went for. I went to school for urban planning, basically to work in city government. And I've never been able to get a job in city government. It's very difficult to get into. You basically have to know somebody, and just never managed to make those right connections. But all the stuff that I learned on my own has taken me a whole lot further. I had my own landscaping business that I was doing for a while, right before my oldest son was born. And then when he was born, decided that I wanted to have a little more stability, because running your own business, you are walking a fine line, especially if you don't have a budget to fall back on. So I wanted something more stable. So my answer was actually to go back to school, but that didn't end up working out the way I wanted it to. But then somehow or another, I got back to landscaping again. And it's doing pretty well for me now. I'm starting to move up in my company, and I guess that was just kind of a little bit of a side tangent, but yeah, I have thought about it, and I would like to eventually branch out on my own more. I have this idea to do container gardens in basically high rises, so especially in places like downtown Minneapolis, but also downtown St. Paul and large parts of the metro here in Minnesota. Almost all the new developments, you'll see just coming standard with each unit, a balcony of some kind or a patio, but just some small outdoor private space. And by and large, people don't really use those spaces. They may have a chair, maybe a small table, but that's about it. But that there's huge potential there to do container gardening. And container gardening is just as it sounds. It's you grow food and flowers and basically whatever you want in containers, everything from small pots to, those window box planters to, over the railing stuff. A wide range of stuff you can do and utilize that space more. So that's the sort of business I would like to do with landscaping. But it takes capital. And I've just come to that hard realization that really to get up and get going, it takes a big chunk of money. There's really just no other way to put it. And right now I'm not really wanting to pursue that sort of thing, because it would mean going to a bank and taking out a big loan at a time where when my wife and I are actually trying to find a condo or a house to buy. We're renting right now, and we're sick of renting, sick of dealing with landlords and property management companies. So that's really our ambition right now in terms of taking out money and taking out loans. If it would be for anything, it would be to actually have a place of our own. But eventually, yes, I would like to own my own business, and hopefully, oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's my wife right there, perennial green. Yeah, I would love to own my own business and, branch out and start gardening all those unused spaces. Like, if you combined all the square footage, especially if you look at the vertical square footage that you could be growing on, say like up the railing of your balcony or up the walls of the outside of your building, there's hundreds, probably maybe even 1,000 acres that you could squeeze out of any given city that are just not really doing anything right now. And that's my idea, is to help people do stuff with that space, using permaculture principles and space-saving techniques to grow a bunch of food and flowers and stuff. Yeah, then that would be the next step, perennial green, to finally get to that. Yeah, true horticulture can go up. Absolutely it can. And like, no one's doing it yet. But at my current position at my landscaping company, I do a lot of container gardening. I mentioned at the beginning of the stream that we're just finishing up our winter planters now. But I do a lot of containers for spring and summer and fall. We rotate plants through for the various seasons. And I like it a lot, and I'm getting really good at that sort of design just by doing it. So yeah, there's potential one day to take that and strike out on my own, but just not in that place yet. But someday hopefully. Yeah, and winter as well. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities that could be. But yeah, let's finish this chapter first. Only have a few minutes left.
Everywhere you will find 1. A comparatively small class of persons who make big profits and who are very rich, such as bankers, great manufacturers, landowners, and people who have much capital,
Yep.
and are therefore called capitalists.
These are all the capitalist class.
These people belong to the capitalist class.
Oh, he was just about to say the same thing.
2. A class of more or less well-to-do people consisting of businessmen and their agents, real estate men, speculators, and professional men such as doctors, lawyers, inventors, and so on. This is the middle class, or the bourgeoisie.
Oh,
3.
that's an interesting conception.
Great numbers of work.
See, I would call that either the petite bourgeoisie, or, I mean, still, doctors. That's an interesting conception of it. I don't quite agree with that. I think that you have the bourgeoisie, which is the big business owners, the big land owners, the people that just make money hand over fist. That's the bourgeoisie, the people that can influence elections and influence laws and policy and all of that sort of thing. If you have that much power, you're part of the bourgeoisie. Then there's the petite bourgeoisie, and these are like local business owners, and even down to like mom and pop shops. If you have your own restaurant, anytime you're in a place where you can hire workers and make money whether or not you are a worker as well, like you could just, kick off any time of the day. You could take off and go play golf, and you'd still make just as much money as if you were in there working. Anytime you're in that position, I would say that you're part of the petite bourgeoisie, at the very least. And then you have the working class. And working class people are anyone that works for someone else, anyone that works for any of the petite bourgeoisie or the bourgeoisie, at the top. So that's all working class people. So I would include doctors and lawyers if they're not in charge of their law firm, and a lot of other people that are paid well but don't necessarily control the means of production. They don't control the business themselves. They don't have, they're not the dictator at the top of whatever institution or business they are a part of. So I would say they're still working class. And these classes are not to be confused with the economic classes, and that's just a factor of income. That could be anybody, whether owner or not. Now, it tends to be that the richer you are, the more you own, because at some point it's just hard to accumulate more money without exploiting a whole hell of a lot of people. There's no billionaires that are not mega owners, that don't own tons and tons of stuff. But there might be some millionaires. I'm sure there are millionaire doctors who work for a hospital and don't have any say in their own pay or, the working conditions or any of these sorts of decisions. That's all made at the top of the hospital or health institution that they work for. So I would say that's the distinction, and that's what places you in whatever class you're in. But he's saying middle class, and I don't really like that conception. I don't think that's useful. That's more of a capitalist way of looking at things, because then you're not concerning yourself then with who's being exploited and who is doing the exploitation. You're only looking at who has more money and who has less money. And then it's really easy to slip in these toxic ideas like, people with less money are just jealous of people with more money, and that's the only reason that they want more equality. So I don't like that way. Natalie says worker co-ops are a great idea. Yeah, I think they are. I agree. I would agree with your opinion on that. And so if any of you are not familiar with what a worker co-op is, or a worker-owned co-op, I should say, first of all, let's differentiate it from a community-owned co-op. A community-owned co-op you may be familiar with. There's quite a few in Minneapolis and St. Paul. In fact, there's more per capita than any other place in the country. There's more community-owned co-ops. But the way that works is anybody can be a member of the co-op. All you have to do is buy your way in, and then you have a say in the running of the co-op. And that's cool. That's definitely a lot of local control over a business. But it's not the same as a worker-owned cooperative. In a worker-owned cooperative, all workers have one share in the company, essentially, and nobody else has any shares that they can influence decisions with. You might be able to sell shares that are non-controlling interest, non-voting shares, so that you couldn't go to, say, a shareholders meeting and make decisions. And the idea would just be to raise capital, and then, just like any other stock that you can't be majority owner of. Say like, so imagine like, you want to be controlling. You want to have the controlling interest that is more than 50% of the votes, or more than 50% of the shares, and hence more than 50% of the votes in, say, a Facebook. There's no way you're going to get to that point. It's just not even possible, because Zuckerberg and his cronies own more than 50% of the company, and they will always own more than 50% of the company. So why would you ever invest in that company, right? If you can never have a say in how it's run, really, because they could always outvote you. what would be the point of investing? Well, I mean, of course, the point is that you're betting on that stock increasing in value so that you can get your money out of it, sell it to someone else, and make a profit, right? The same could be done with a worker-owned cooperative. They could sell non-voting shares so that people would invest in their company. You know, they'd pay to buy the stock of the company without having any say in that company, just on the notion that the stock is going to mature and they will make money back on their investment. But yes, so the important part of the worker-owned cooperative is only the workers have shares, and each share is equal with every other share. And then each one of you becomes a stockholder, an equal part stockholder in that company. So when things like how to split the profit come up, or what working conditions should be, what the scheduling should be, all of the important workings of a business, all of those decisions are then made democratically, as a whole. So I think it's a wonderful way to do things. And if I ever do have my own landscaping business, that is absolutely the way that I'm going to set it up. And it's somewhat difficult in this state, my particular state of Minnesota, to do that, because I don't know that they recognize a different, a worker-owned cooperative model legally. Right? I don't think it's a separate legal entity. They do have a conception for community-owned cooperatives, where you shall sell shares to the general public, but they require you to have a board of directors in order to be a legally recognized cooperative. And in a worker-owned cooperative, you wouldn't probably have a board of directors, because you would serve as the board of directors yourselves. So there still would be ways to do it. It just would be that, you would set up your legal framework so that everyone had shares. You just wouldn't be a recognized cooperative by the state. I think that's how it would work. That's my understanding anyway. So Natalie was talking about going back up to Natalie's earlier comment there, she says, the way I understand is that the middle class is not always the working class in terms of the class structure. And that's true. You can be middle class and be a small business owner. That's definitely true. And then as far as I'm concerned, you are not part of the working class. No matter how, that there could be working class people that make more money than you, but you still have more power over people's daily lives, in that you can, literally, if you're in a at-will employment state, you can just fire people on the spot for any reason or no reason. So, that's a whole lot more power than just having more money, in my opinion. And you're likely going to have a whole lot more sway over your local government than someone who just has a lot of money but is a worker. So yeah, it can get confusing with different ways that people talk about class. But I think in terms of building solidarity and a real working class movement, the important way to conceptualize things is that if you are not an owner, you are part of a working class. And if you are an owner and you have maybe some local power, but not, statewide or federal power, then you're part of the petite bourgeoisie, or the petty bourgeoisie. And then if you do have a lot of influence over state and local power, then you're squarely in the bourgeoisie. And those are the class structures that matter more than anything, especially when building political movements. Because, think about it. If capitalism were to be overthrown tomorrow, who would stand to gain the most and who would stand to lose the most? The people that benefit the most right now are the capitalist class. Even if they're not making as much money as some members of the working class, they still have a lot more at stake. So you probably want to be very wary of who you align yourself with if you're trying to overthrow a system that works right now really well for the interests of a certain class of people. You might not want to include them in your movement. or at least be very wary about how you do so. So I think that's the important dividing line, more so than who has this amount of money or that amount of money. I think that's less important. And then Natalie was talking after that about a worker cooperative in Italy. I think you're probably thinking of the Mondragon Corporation, which is the largest confederation of worker-owned cooperatives in the world. There's hundreds of member-owned, of member cooperatives that all are part of that larger confederation of cooperatives, and that is a really great model for business. It's something that Richard Wolff talks a lot about. And if you're not familiar with his work, definitely go get familiar with Richard Wolff, because he knows a lot about all sorts of socialist ideas. And his big thing that he promotes is worker cooperatives. So he studied the Mondragon Corporation a lot. And yeah, it works really well. And they've managed to keep it so, like, it's not like it's a perfectly egalitarian or equal system, but the highest paid person in that federation of cooperatives is only paid 20 times more than the lowest paid person. And you compare that to a large corporation, and it can be that the lowest paid person or the highest paid person at, say like a Walmart or something like that, could be paid thousands of times more, hundreds of thousands of times more than the lowest paid person at that corporation, especially if you're talking even as big as like Amazon or something like that. Yeah, you're talking about many orders of magnitude larger in income discrepancy. And there's a lot more worker satisfaction in worker-owned cooperatives just across the board, but they found that definitely to be true with the Mondragon Corporation. So they're another cool one to look into. We'll look into that on this stream at some point, but probably a lot of theory I'd like to get through first before we start tackling that sort of thing. So I think we'll move on in the book.
Working men employed in various industries, in mills and mines and factories and shops, in transports, and on the land. This is the working class, also called the proletariat. The bourgeoisie and the capitalists really belong to the same capitalistic class because they have about the same interests, and therefore the people of the bourgeoisie generally side with the capitalist class against the working class. You will find that the working class is always the poorest class.
Yeah.
In every country.
And see, again, he brought up a very important point that when push comes to shove and it comes to any sort of a revolution taking place, it's going to be the petty bourgeoisie that's going to take the side of the bourgeois interests. And, the actual, the highest level, the bourgeoisie, needs the petty bourgeoisie on their side, if for no other reason than the bourgeoisie is always the smallest in number. But they also need public opinion to sway to their side. And we have a lot of deference and respect for, mom and pop shop owners in this country, and around the world, really. They're seen as honest and hardworking and, just upstanding pillars of the community, all these sorts of things. Whether or not that's ever true, when you get down to a case-by-case basis, that's another issue. But they're at least perceived as having that kind of salt-of-the-earth quality to them. And so the bourgeoisie needs for them to be on their side. And usually that's how it shakes out, is the petty bourgeoisie is like, oh, I've worked my entire life to build up my business, my small little piece of the business world, and I don't want it to just be dashed to pieces for the sake of some silly revolution. So I'm going to side with order. It's not a coincidence that every time there's some sort of a demonstration, people on the right are always like, what about the small business owners? when they're talking about, oh, a window got broken, or an Arby's got burned down, or these sorts of things. What about all these small business owners? Don't you care about them and their property? It always goes to property and to the people that own property as the major concern of the people on the right, whereas the people on the left care much more about the reason that there was any sort of an uprising in the first place, and usually the human exploitation that was at the root cause. So, yeah, that too shows you where the battle lines are, for lack of a better word, where they're likely to be is along who owns and who doesn't, because the people that own always have a lot more to lose than the people that don't, if any sort of an egalitarian society is being pushed for. So yeah, let's continue though.
Country. Maybe you yourself belong to the workers, to the proletariat. Then you know that your wages will never make you rich. Why then are the workers the poorest class? Surely they labor more than any other classes, and harder. Is it because the workers are not very important in the life of society? Perhaps we can even do without them. Let us see.
No.
What do we need to live? We need food, clothing, shelter, schools for our children, streetcars for travel, and 1,001 other things. Can you look around and point at a single thing that was made without labor? Why, the shoes you stand in and the streets that you walk on are the result of labor. Without labor, there would be nothing but the bare earth, and human life would be entirely impossible. So it means that labor has created everything we have, all the wealth of the world. It is also the product of labor applied to the earth and its natural resources. But if that wealth is the product of labor, then why does it not belong to labor? That is, to those who have worked with their hands.
So this principle that labor creates all value is known as the labor theory of value, and you may have heard of this concept before. It's most often associated with Marx, but he didn't actually coin that philosophy. He did not come up with that himself. It's much older. It even goes back to the likes of Adam Smith, who's seen as one of the fathers of modern day capitalism. So I'll put a link in a quick link in the chat right now, just so you can get the barest idea of what the labor theory of value is and where it comes from, and you can kind of look at that at your leisure. But it's an important concept in leftist politics. Definitely one to look out for. But yeah, let's continue.
With their heads to create it, the manual worker and the brain worker. Everyone agrees that a person has the right to own a thing that he himself has made. But no one person has made or can make anything all by himself.
So there's a very important point as well. You can throw as much money as you want at a machine, but that won't turn that machine on, and it won't start manufacturing things for you. You can pile up money at the entrance to a cafe that you own, but it's not going to serve people their pancakes and coffee. It is labor that produces value. Without labor, money is worthless. Continue on just a little bit here.
It takes many men of different trade and professions to create something. The carpenter, for instance, cannot make a simple chair or bench all by himself, not even if he should cut down a tree and prepare the lumber by himself. He needs a saw and a hammer, nails and tools, which he cannot make for himself. And even if he should make these for himself, he would first have to supply the raw materials, steel and iron, which other men would have to supply. Or take, for example, let us say, a civil engineer. He could do nothing without paper and pencil and measuring tools, and these things other people have to make for him. Not to mention that first he has to learn his profession and spend many years in study while others enable him to live in the meantime.
And this is another point that Peter Kropotkin likes to bring up. It's that we are all the product of countless generations of knowledge and material buildup. None of us, emerges from the womb and completely is independent for our entire lives and literally builds everything for ourselves and gets all of our food for ourselves. No one is completely independent. No one is an island. We all are reliant on one another, both in the here and now and across the generations. We are all the inheritors of an inestimable wealth of knowledge and skills and material build up from people that are long deceased. And it's just a sad happenstance that a minority of people have taken that inheritance, which is due all of us, because they, obviously they themselves didn't create it if it's been created over many generations. But some people take that for themselves and then use their hoarded knowledge and material to extract more knowledge and material out of other people in the form of a business. And there's a good example. There's a video that I'm thinking of that I'm going to go track down as we're listening here, but it illustrates why things like intellectual property are really stupid when you really think about it. It's this video. It's from, I believe they're called the Axis of Awesome. It's just this Australian musical comedy group, and they show that virtually every major pop song from like the last 40, 50 years follows the exact same chord progression, the exact same one. And once you hear the songs that they play to demonstrate this, you'll see that's absolutely true. Now, it can't be that all of these pop singers and songwriters just magically happened upon this chord progression and put it into their work without the knowledge of all this other stuff. Of course not. All art is derivative of the mountains of art that came before it. And it's the same with all intellectual property, which is why it's so silly to allow some people to, put an arbitrary cutoff and say, well, I have gotten all of my ideas from all these other people, spanning the generations, but this one little thing that I've done, I'm going to put a mark there and say, this is only mine. And if you do this, if you repeat this again in this exact same way that I've done it, I'm going to sue you because I own that idea. It's just ridiculous because that idea is an amalgam and a product of so much effort that happened way before that particular artist was even born. The same is true of literature. Like there's the hero of 1,000 faces. This idea that there's this story arc that shows up again and again and again. Think about the romantic comedy. It all follows the same basic formula. So to say that this particular romantic comedy that I've made is somehow completely unique and worthy of protection from every other person who would ever want to use it in any way imaginable is ridiculous, because no idea is completely unique. It is all, I mean, the idea that we even, have a language that we communicate with each other. None of us created this language. It all has been inherited. All this knowledge has been inherited. And so it should be for everyone's benefit. And it's just because of these arbitrary rules that prize mental effort above physical effort every single time, that we have things like, copyright law and intellectual property law and all this ridiculousness. But yeah, I'll go look up that one video. I'm not not going to play it on the stream because I probably would be, probably get a copyright claim if I did. But I'll go look that up right now.
This applies to every human being in the world today. You can see that no person by his own efforts can make things he needs to exist. In early times, primitive man who lived in a cave could hammer a hatchet out of stone or make himself a bow and arrow and live by that. But those days are gone. Today, no man can live by his own work. He must be helped by the labor of others. Therefore, all that we have, all wealth, is the product of labor of many people, even many generations.
Absolutely.
That is
true.
to say, all labor and the products of labor are social and made by society as a whole. But if all wealth we have is social, then it stands to reason that it should belong to society and to the people as a whole. How does it happen, then, that the wealth of the world is owned by some individuals and not the people? Why does it not belong to the people who have toiled to create it, the masses who work with hand or brain, the working class as a whole? You know very well that it is the capitalistic class that owns the greater part of the world's wealth. Must we therefore not conclude that the working people have lost the wealth they have created, or somehow it was taken away from them? They did not lose it, for they never owned it. Then it must be that it was taken away from them. This is beginning to look serious. If you say that the wealth they created has been taken away from them, from the people who created it, then it means that it has been stolen from them, that they have been robbed.
Mm-hmm.
For surely no one has ever willingly consented to have his wealth taken away from him. It is a terrible charge, but it is true. The wealth the workers have created as a class has been stolen from them, and they are being robbed in the same way every day of their lives, even at this moment. That is why one of the greatest thinkers of French philosophy, Proudhon, said that the possessions of the rich are stolen property. Mm-hmm. You can readily understand how important it is that every honest man should know about this, and you may be sure that if the workers knew about it, they would not stand for it. Let us see how they are robbed, and by whom.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist.
All right. Good stuff. So yeah, that was a great chapter. That really laid out a lot of important concepts. And for any of you who have been with this series or have gone back and looked at the archives, you'll see a lot of these ideas are coming from Peter Kropotkin, especially when he talks about the idea that products are all created by all workers, not just now, but throughout the generations. So you bookmarked that song. That's good. That's a fun song. I really encourage people to go look at that Axis of Awesome, the 4-chord song. And just a little teaser for you. It's the same 4 chords that go to what is that song called? Don't Stop Believin'. So if you can imagine the opening chords of Don't Stop Believin', you know what 4 chords are throughout almost every pop song, even till today. That's great. I'm really glad that helped you a lot there, Radiant. I'm very pleased. That's what I'm here to do. So we're just dipping a toe into some ideas of anarchism, and I like the way he's laying it out so far. Aside from his throwing the middle class in there, I don't think that was a helpful way of conceptualizing things. But yeah, beyond that, he's got some good, theoretical bases that he's throwing down. So that's good. Yeah, gave you a place to start your learning. That's great, Radiant. All right, so I think that's going to do it for tonight. If you are joining me from Twitch, we're definitely going to raid into somebody. So now's the time to throw out suggestions. And please come along with me if you're on Twitch as well, so that we can make the raid bigger, and I can help expose you to some more cool leftist streamers. Yeah, peace and harmony to you as well. I enjoyed having you in the discussion here, and you as well, Natalie, if you're still around. Yeah, thanks for asking good questions, everybody. And just a reminder, I will be doing my Sunday stream at let's say 6 o'clock this upcoming Sunday, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. And I'm going to be doing audience requested videos. So we're going to start with how democracy works, or how the government is structured in Cuba, and we're going to look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And there's one more cool video that we're going to check out. Yeah, I hope to see you then as well, Radiant. But just hang on 1 second, and we'll start the raid. Let's see who we can find who's on tonight. Lots of people on right now. That's good to see. Comic-Con would be a good one. I always like reading a feminist critique as well. I'm guessing Comic-Con is just starting, so that might be a good one to put you into. We're going to have to wait and see. So we'll tentatively say that we're going to get right into Comic-Con. Oh, you're quite welcome, Natalie. I'm really glad to have you here. Oh, thanks. I appreciate being a good teacher. It kind of runs in my family's blood. Like almost every one of my cousins and aunts and uncles, at least half of them are teachers or have been teachers at some point in their life. So it definitely is strong in my family. So I do appreciate you saying that. So here's the channel we're going to be going to, but just hang on with me and we'll do the raid ourselves. Oh, it looks like he has been doing it a while. Well, cool. Going to be Comic-Con, and all right. Wish everybody else a pleasant rest of your evening, and hope to see you all Sunday. And good night, everybody.